You're listening to Sweet Talk, all things maple. I'm your host, Adam Wild, and joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Whiteman. Hello, Aaron.
Hi, Adam. It's good to be back. And for our listeners, I just want to apologize for my voice. I'm feeling a little under the weather today.
So, Aaron, our taps are all pulled, and we've kind of wrapped up the necessary cleaning at the end of the season. So now that we have this full crop of maple syrup, it's important to think about marketing that crop.
That's right. There are a lot of ways to market syrup. And we use a combination of the three main sales strategies for maple syrup, which are first, bulk sales. So you sell syrup in a drum to someone else and then they package it. The second method is wholesale, where we put the syrup in containers, but then we sell it at a discounted price to a retailer and then they do the sales transaction. And then the last method is direct to consumer retail sales.
And most maple producers, especially smaller producers, are probably familiar with that retail direct-to-consumer market, but that bulk syrup market is maybe not as well known. And so in today's episode, we're going to take a deep dive into the bulk maple syrup market.
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic. During the current period of growth in the maple industry, we've seen a few large maple operations develop their own large-scale retail lines of syrup. But for the most part, the maple industry is unique in that it's still mostly comprised of small family operations.
And most maple facilities don't produce enough syrup to develop connections with the large retail or wholesale accounts. When I say large accounts, I'm referring to the big box stores who are distributing around the country and abroad, or those large food processing facilities that could be using vast quantities of maple syrup and granolas, or maybe as flavoring in different meat products.
Yeah, the maple syrup industry does have a few large packers who purchase bulk syrup from producers in a sufficient quantity to supply large accounts. And on top of that, they've also created markets for off-flavored syrups.
And recently, I had the opportunity to talk with representatives of two of the larger maple syrup packers in the northeastern U.S. and find out how their businesses actually operate.
Yeah, I'm eager to hear their thoughts on the current state of the industry. Shall we have a listen?
First, I sat down with David Marvin and Emma Marvin from Vermont-based Butternut Mountain Farms, a large bulk maple syrup buyer and wholesale maple retailer. David and Emma, thank you for being with us today on Sweet Talk. If you could start out by each of you introducing yourself and telling us about your company name and title.
Good morning, Emma Marvin. I am one of the co-owners of Butternut Mountain Farm and also responsible for our sales, marketing, and consumer direct efforts.
I'm David Marvin. I'm the founder of Butternut Mountain Farm, and I am responsible largely for our syrup purchasing. That is the relationships we have with our suppliers.
Great. Can you provide just a brief description of your company for those who may not be familiar?
Well, we're a mission-driven company. Our mission is to be a profitable, diversified, value-added maple syrup supplier. And in accomplishing that, we work with a significant number of maple producers and add their production to that we produce on our own farm. And we market it to a diversified customer base all over the world, but primarily in the United States.
Okay. So you're a large buyer of maple syrup. And so do you have a rough estimate of how many pounds or gallons of maple syrup that you buy within a year that you might be willing to share? And obviously that probably changes each year, right? But
we know exactly how much we buy each year, but we prefer not to make that a public because it's information that could be useful to other people that we compete with. So
yeah, understandable. But I'm sure it's a significant quantity, right?
Suffice it to say, we're one of the top 10 processors of maple syrup in the world, probably.
Another way of putting it would be to say that the production from our own farm at this point represents less than 1% of the syrup that moves through our facility.
Okay. And how many taps or how large is your own farm? Not to try to multiply that out, but
we're just shy of 30,000 taps.
Okay, great. So a significant operation as well.
We have about 150 employees, as that gives some sense. And our facilities represent a little less than 200,000 square feet of production and storage for maple syrup processing.
Yeah, great. That's a great kind of way to quantify that size of the operation. And beyond just making maple syrup, you folks do a lot of confections and other kind of value-added or new product development type of things, correct?
We do. We do more traditional maple products, so maple candy, maple butter or cream, depending on how you want to call it, and a significant amount of maple sugar, granulated maple sugar, for the industrial market primarily, as well as complementary products that we've formulated and either make or have made for us. We're not a specialty food company. We're really a maple company, but we do infused syrups as an example as well, and have for a very long time done infused syrups.
Yeah, it's not anything new for you.
Right.
Yeah. Another question I had is, and I know you guys have a little bit different model than some of the other large buyers of maple syrup. And so I guess the question is, can anyone sell you bulk syrup? If somebody showed up at your warehouse door?
The answer, to be clear, is no. We are always interested in hearing from producers who might want to sell to us and learning more about them, because we like to enter into relationships that are long-term, so we have a predictable supply and our customers have a predictable supply. We also like to vet the suppliers we have so that we know that they're quality producers, and we are not in a position to simply have syrup come in unannounced. Every barrel of syrup that comes in is scheduled and planned for so that we can do all of our quality checks and make sure that all the paperwork that accompanies it is correct.
I would just build off of that a little bit and note that food safety is critically important to us. And that's part of the reason those relationships are so critical. It allows us to know how the syrup was produced, where it was produced, what the practices were that individual producer was using.
Yeah, I think that's important. That's a great model. And how far just, geographically are your producers that sell you syrup roughly?
By and large, our purchasing area runs from Western New York to Northern Maine and into Quebec. Of course, all of Vermont and a little bit out of New Hampshire.
Great. That's a pretty wide spread that covers a good significant area of the maple industry.
It's important for us to have a diversified supply so that in every year, the weather can be very different across that region. And so we like to be able to source where people are likely to have had a good crop, where some might not.
Yep, true. Like this year, Western New York was down a little bit, right? Whereas Vermont and Northern New York had a great season. So
correct.
Another question is there a grade that sells better for you? So thinking from the packer standpoint to, your wholesaling syrup.
So we worked really hard to create markets for all of the grades of maple syrup. And so I would say they all sell really well for us. We have a market for everything that the producers we work with make.
Great. That's good. That's a good thing to have, right? So what is what is one thing that you wish every producer knew before bringing their bulk maple syrup to you? So, maybe another way to phrase that is, you see thousands of gallons of syrup coming through your doors each year. So there's probably some common issues that you have to deal with each year.
They're common issues, but the most important thing is integrity. So we need to be able to trust people to do the right thing to make a safe product and a quality product. So we require, before you bring syrup, that you sign a letter of guarantee that says that it's been made with food-safe equipment, there's been no allergen introduced to the syrup, and that you understand food safety practices. We are selling a food product, and we need to be sure that, first and foremost, our final consumer has a safe product and then a quality product. So that's number one. To ensure that, we, in addition to a letter of guarantee, we ask for detailed sugar house records, which detail each barrel, what grade it's assumed to be. If there are any anomalies, we're okay with that as long as we know. So if someone says, I blew a filter paper, make a note so we can accommodate that in our pumping and filtering ourselves. I checked the density. I think it might be off on this drum. Those kinds of things, as long as we know, we're fine with.
So honesty is the key.
Absolutely.
Are there common syrup quality issues that you come across?
Yeah, the most common are off density. Another that we have difficulty with is people's perception of flavor, especially newer producers who aren't experienced with the range of flavors that can be produced in a year, may focus more on the color of the syrup they made than the flavor. It's quite common now with clean, modern operations to make light-colored syrup late in the season with an off taste. And we have to classify that accordingly. And in most cases, in all cases, if it's seriously off, we have to pay differently for it because we can't sell it in a retail bottle.
Mm-hmm.
We're really focused on flavor throughout our operation because that's what the end consumer cares about. They care about what the product tastes like. And so we're really trying to make sure that whenever we're putting syrup in a bottle, that it is as representative as possible of that grade's flavor.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's fortunately sometimes we focus too much on the color and not the actual flavor, right, of that syrup.
That's correct. The other thing is the newer producers may not have records that are ideal for us. We'll work with people to get them up to speed with what we want, but we require a record of each barrel, the day or days it was made, its number sequence, its sequence in the crop, and then we also require a sample bottle from that barrel. I mentioned we work on trust and integrity. We don't open the syrup from 99% of the people we deal with. We purchase it based on a sample of that barrel. That way, the integrity of the syrup in the barrel is maintained. It was hot packed and sealed and is under vacuum. It's going to keep for a long time. But it takes a trusting relationship to do that. That's why we're careful about how we select our suppliers.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some of the common maybe off flavors, or is there one that's more common than others?
It really depends on the season, I would say.
The most common would be what people call metabolism, and there are two occurrences of that. There's sometimes early season metabolism flavor. It's almost a chemically flavor. It's also sometimes called woody, and that also occurs at the end of the season before syrup turns buddy. That's more common. Many people stop making syrup when it turns buddy. If the syrup is clean and filtered, we can deal with buddy syrup, but it's not grade A. It's processing or substandard, depending on how severe it is. That's probably the most common. Some others that occur would be in organic production, the excessive use of the oils for defoaming. So we can pick up a flavor of canola or safflower oil sometimes. Those would be the most common.
Sour sap.
Sour that's a good one, yes.
Especially warm seasons like last year.
Yeah, that honey taste that comes in the
or
syrup.
Fruity.
Fruity, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the kind of raspberry a little bit flavor.
Yeah.
Do you ever try to do anything to convert that processing grade, sour syrup, buddy syrup, or anything back into table grade syrup? Or
No.
We've worked hard to create markets for processing grade, and we have customers that can use syrup that has that strong flavor. And you can imagine pretty easily buddy, which is a little nutty or chocolatey, how it might really complement other ingredients in a manufacturing setting. And so there are absolutely customers who can make use of that kind of syrup as an ingredient alongside other food ingredients in manufacturing a product.
It's very true that a couple of flavors in particular, musty or moldy and buddy, cannot be blended out. I can taste it. Any of us can taste it in good syrup. And so when we're producing syrup for the consumer, the tabletop in a bottle or a jug, it has to be characteristic of that grade. And you can't really blend them out. Even if that was a strategy that someone wanted to do, it's not a good one. And as Emma said, building a market for those flavors is what's really key. We can volatilize some of the off flavors off in our sugar making process. And since our sugar, as is true with processing syrup, most often goes into industrial use, it's not as big a problem there as long as the user understands what the flavor is that they're getting.
Without trying to delve too far into, your company's proprietary information and customers, are you able to give some kind of general markets of where that processing grade goes?
Yeah, so the kinds of customers that would use processing grade might be someone making sausage in the meat packing industry, could be a cereal manufacturer making granola, a yogurt company where maple is a complementary flavor. Those are the kinds of customers that we see.
Yeah, great. That's great to hear because I think, anybody can sell maple syrup to their neighbor, but creating that processing grade market's a little more unique.
And it comes back to the importance of food safety. Those customers really care about making sure that the syrup was produced in a way that makes it allergen free. They care about whether or not there are any kinds of foreign materials, any kind of introduced contaminants that could possibly jeopardize their brand and the product they're making. And so it behooves us to make sure that we're working with folks who are really thoughtful and cautious about how they're producing the pure maple syrup they make.
And I would add that many of these customers are very large multinational food manufacturing companies. So in a sense, we provide a service, I think, to the producers in the industry because we can aggregate enough product to supply them, where our own farm or any of the folks we deal with alone wouldn't be able to access that market.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. It's a huge, I mean, all of what you do is important for the industry, but that is certainly one that I don't think any producer on their own can do on a small scale.
I think the one other thing as it relates to processing that's really a value that Butternut Mountain Farm brings is the consistency of that product. Those customers require a product that is nearly identical every single time they receive a batch of syrup. And we all know processing grade could be sour, could be buddy, could be ferment. Figuring out a recipe that we can be consistent with time and time again is really critical for those customers. And again, the volume of syrup that we source allows us to provide that consistency in a way that would be almost impossible for any of us as individual maple producers to do.
True. Because they don't want their granola or cookies or whatever to taste different. You know, their customers aren't going to be happy.
It's ironic. It's more work processing syrup for our customers than, say, golden. That's a slam dunk because really good golden is really good golden, and it goes in a bottle and it tastes great when it comes out. But processing is an art.
Yeah, that's true. I've never thought about it that way. Is that market for processing grade syrup growing?
I would say yes. Folks enjoy, and by folks I mean consumers, enjoy maple as a flavor. And so every time there's an opportunity for a food manufacturer to differentiate themselves by adding maple as one of those sales elements for the product they're making, it's a slam dunk for us. And given how folks have had an opportunity to experience maple during the pandemic, more people know what maple tastes like today than ever before. Add to that maple is perceived as a clean, healthier sweetener, and it really helps food manufacturers who are looking to clean up their labels have ingredient lists that you or I could read and understand exactly what every one of those ingredients is. Maple is really good for that too.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear that, because that's just going to help grow the industry, whether it's processing grade or table grade. Getting into more food products and getting that name on that food package is important. Do you think maple producers should continue to make processing grade? Because if that market is growing, not purposely make it maybe, but should they keep pushing through that season?
We want to make a market for people's whole production. I understand people who like to quit because they don't take any pride in making syrup at the end of the year, but we want to walk the talk. We make syrup until we can't anymore on our own farm. Because with tubing systems and modern technology, once you're set up, the cost of making processing syrup is only your variable cost. So labor and fuel, electricity to go into making that product. And particularly in poorer years, it can be the margin of profit if there is profit in a poor year. And it's worth making. And we'll continue to work hard to make markets for that product if people choose to make it and sell it to us.
Are there different processing grades of syrup that sell a little bit better for you, like is buddy or metallic-y, or is there any?
We don't, certainly on the supply side, we don't differentiate. So we have the 4 classes of table syrup and then processing grade and then substandard. So we don't really split it out the way it is done in the Quebec Maple Federation grading system with various characterizations of the off flavors. We do characterize them on the receiving information and on the barrels so that when we come to make our batches, we know what it is. But in terms of pricing, no, it's just a matter of what we need to know in order to have our recipe come out consistently, as we said earlier.
What constitutes that kind of subgrade? Is that like ropey syrups or unfiltered syrups?
Yes, ropey or unfiltered.
Yeah, okay.
We don't even really want that because if a producer can't filter it, neither can we. And ropey is incredibly difficult to deal with. In fact, over the years, I've had to simply destroy some syrup that came in because we kept putting it aside because we couldn't work with it, and it doesn't get better.
No.
So,
is there a point within the season maybe a producer should just stop making syrup if it's getting ropey or they can't filter it, or when's a good
if you can't filter it and it's turning ropey, we don't want it, and you should stop. But for those people who remember 2012, March 17th, 18th, and 19th that year, the temperature in most of the maple region went into the high 70s or low 80s. And everywhere in the maple belt, off-flavored syrup occurred after that. We'd only made about 50% of a crop by then. people needed to make syrup afterward, and the trees still produced sap, but it had an off flavor. It took us 4 or 5 years to use up that inventory of off flavor, but we're glad we were able to purchase it for people, because otherwise, financially, it would have been absolutely a disaster. It was still a bad year, but it was better because people were able to make that syrup. So we want to work with people. We all have to be successful over the long haul for any of us to be successful.
Yeah, great. What are some of the biggest factors that help you determine your bulk syrup prices?
Our prices are based on the crop size, the carryover of syrup in the world, so inventory. Very importantly, the value of the Canadian dollar, because 70% plus of the world's supply is made in Canada, most of it in Quebec. And so the bulk price is basically set in Canadian dollars. So we have to look at and anticipate what the exchange rate is going to be between the US dollar and the Canadian dollar. So it's weather, supply, and Canadian dollar are the three biggest influences. There are other things. What are the costs that producers have incurred in a year, like last year, where there was high inflationary cost for fuel and electricity and labor and all of those things? Those come into play, of course. And then, very importantly, is what will the consumer be able to pay? And our intermediate buyer, that is the store chain or the industrial user, what are they willing to accept from us? Because if we can't sell the product, then whatever price we paid is irrelevant. Mm-hmm. It may not sound truthful, but it is. We try to pay as much as we can. And we really have to do that irrespective of what other people are paying. We do know what the Federation price is, though. As a floor, in Quebec, there can be a premium above the Federation price paid to producers. And there was this year, as an example. So we take that into consideration as well. But you know what you're going to get when you come to us based on whether you're conventional or organic and the volume you bring, whether you own the barrel and whether you deliver or we pick up. All those are laid out and they're transparent.
And your prices don't fluctuate throughout the year, correct?
No. Years ago, we decided to pay a premium for people who would wait to get paid for their syrup. And over a period of many years, a supplier to us would end up getting an overall higher price, because if they waited till fall, they're always going to get more from us because we pay them for the use of their time and money.
For their storage, they're basically using their warehouse, right?
It's equivalent to interest, but we characterize it as a premium payment for waiting, and we pay based on the amount of time it is between June 1st and when we receive their syrup or we pay for their syrup.
Yeah, interesting. And if it's cheaper for you to go to Canada, that's why that Canadian dollar is important, right?
It's not about us being able to buy Canadian dollar syrup cheaper. It's about our competition being able to go to our customers with syrup that they bought in Canada. We have to compete against that. We're still going to buy from our regular people first, and we will go to Quebec if there's not enough supply or because we have a demand for some customers who want syrup from Canada even. But the reason we care about what the price is in Canada is that's what we compete against.
It's about maintaining the market that we've developed over all of the years. And we have to be able to sell at a competitive price. And if we can't sell at a competitive price, then that market eventually erodes and disappears. And we're no longer providing that service to the producers that choose to work with us at Butternut Mountain Farm. And that's the yin and the yang that we live with every spring, is figuring out where's the sweet spot between how much can we pay and how much are customers willing to pay to work with Butternut Mountain Farm because of all of the values we bring.
Let me just give an example. Let's say we're 10 cents higher than our Canadian competition. On a quart of syrup, that's 27.5 cents, right? And if our cost is over a quarter per bottle more than our competition, the grocery buyer for a major chain will not buy from us. They'll buy from someone who's 27.5 cents less. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Because, those large grocery chains, they're just looking at the bottom line, right?
And they're looking at pennies per unit. And we need to be able to work in that environment because that's how we're moving the very large crops that we're producing now. I'll give you another context. When I started in making syrup, Vermont made about 220 to 240,000 gallons a year. I believe this year we'll make 2.4 million gallons. So the industry has grown tenfold in my career. And the way that's happened is by reaching much broader audience for product, which is the mass market. While it's very price competitive, it also, though, has made it possible for maple to expand and grow.
Great. Those are great answers, and I really appreciate your time, David and Emma. Is there anything else that you would like to wrap up this time with?
I would like to go back to the beginning about quality and safety. It just can't be oversaid. People need to really be thinking carefully about the fact that they're making a food product. It makes me cringe when I go in a sugar house and see a can of cocktail peanuts on the shelf, knowing that peanuts are one of the most critical allergens. If you ate some of those peanuts, did you wash your hands before you changed the filter press or grabbed a hydrometer? Those are really important safety things that people don't think about. And using all lead-free equipment is really important. I know it's tempting to buy some used old piece of machinery, but if it's going to contaminate with heavy metals, that's going to be picked up by the big industrial users or by food safety and quality inspectors in the marketplace, and it's going to impact all of us. If you think you've created a safety problem, don't hide it, highlight it so that we can deal with it and determine whether it's something that has to be kept off the market.
Consumers love maple syrup because it's pure, it's natural, it's a real food, and the worst thing we could do is jeopardize why our customers love the product we make by contaminating it with something.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great way to summarize this all. And thank you for all that you do for the maple industry. It's really important. And I know beyond just what you do of buying maple syrup, but just in helping push the industry and market the industry is really appreciated. So thank you.
Kind of you to say thank you.
Next, I caught up with Bruce Bascom and Matthew Bascom of New Hampshire-based Bascom Maple Farms, another large buyer of bulk maple syrup and seller of both maple products and equipment. I caught up with Bruce and Matthew during a recent maple meeting and conducted our interview in a busy hallway outside of the conference room. I'll start with you, Bruce.
Bruce Bascom, company would be Bascom Maple Farms in Elston, New Hampshire.
Matthew Bascom, bulk syrup manager, so I do a lot with receiving tractor-trailer truckloads and grading syrup.
And can you just provide a real brief description of your company?
Well, we do different things. We make maple syrup from about 110,000 taps. We also sell maple equipment and supplies from 3 different manufacturers, and then we buy bulk syrup from quite a few hundred producers and heat it up and pack it and pasteurize it and put it in retail containers to sell to mostly grocery chains and price clubs.
Sounds great. And are you willing to share kind of how much maple syrup that you purchase in a single year? At least give an idea of the size of scale.
Easy answer is no, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 or 3 larger packers in the United States, so we're in the top couple.
Yeah.
Size-wise.
Yeah, so I think that's fair to understand that there's thousands of gallons of maple syrup that come through your doors each year. So there's probably some common issues that you deal with. So what are some of those common issues or things that you wish maple producers knew?
Selling to us specifically should get a doc appointment before they just show up. Helps us spread people out a little bit more so you're not waiting for 3 or 4 hours to be unloaded. Keeping equipment clean, everything from evaporator to the outside of your drums to the trailer that you're bringing syrup in. It's a food product and should be treated with clean equipment and clean tools. Are there common kind of quality issues that you see?
Well, we prefer people use either stainless drums or maybe 55-gallon new epoxy steel drums. The syrup in general does not keep as well in plastic barrels. And we also are not buying 5-gallon cans anymore. There's too much handling for a relatively small amount of syrup. So we prefer 40 gallons in size and bigger, and they should spend the extra money to buy the stainless. The syrup keeps better, tastes better.
Do you guys have a market for processing grade syrup, and are you willing to share some common kind of themes for where processing grade syrup is used? Not giving away specific customers and proprietary information, but just kind of those general markets.
Well, usually people have the opportunity either to stop at the end of the season or make off-flavored syrup the last couple of days. And sometimes they hang on 2 days longer than they should, and they'd be better off if they did not produce that off-flavored, buddy tasting syrup at the end. But There is industrial markets that for a lower price syrup, they will use off taste, be it butty or sour or all kinds of strange flavors for like alcohol products, meat packing companies, markets where the flavor is not particularly important. But the trouble with that market is it's not like a retail market where the syrup has to taste really good and there's all kinds of value-added type of products. It's more of a dumping ground for an industrial use, so you might only get half price for it. But there is a place to sell it. We've got hundreds of accounts that buy very dark, strong grade or off-flavored syrup, but it's, there's accounts out there that using it, for example, for dog food, things of that nature.
Are there, and I'll admit that I made a little bit of processing grade syrup this year that ultimately ended up in your warehouse or is heading towards your warehouse.
Maybe I
shouldn't tell you that, but are there types of processing grade syrup that are easier to market, or you prefer, buddy syrup or metallic-y syrup or anything like that you prefer over other types of processing grade syrups?
Well, sometimes buddy can be really rank and hard to mix with anything, but darker processing grades tend to be easier to use, because if you think something like a sausage, it's going to tend to lighten up your color if you're putting much in there. But if it's more of a very dark color, it tends to fit better with the color of the meat.
Yes, sometimes you don't have a choice. I mean, some years there's very little buddy syrup made in whole regions of the country, but you'll get, like this year, we didn't make any buddy syrup ourselves, but the last couple of days the sap was sour and we had a very strong sour sap flavor. And that kind of syrup you can mix to a certain low percentage with some of the black, very dark, strong, and use it for people that might put it in, granola, stuff like that.
What percentage of your business is organic maple syrup?
I would say probably at least 50%, maybe more than that. It's increasing all the time.
And do you see that continuing to increase?
Probably. Some markets it doesn't really matter. I mean, you take the local producers in Vermont, New Hampshire, when people have came up from Boston and New York, they want to go to the local farm, buy native syrup, buy directly from that producer, and they don't really care if it's organic. But if you're a packer selling quite a bit of syrup, let's say in California, there's a big natural foods industry, a lot of organic markets, and you better have organically certified syrup or you're not going to get into most of the stores at all. And we sell a lot more syrup in California than we do all of New England, then some, substantially more.
That's interesting to hear, but it makes sense because all the local producers are selling within New England, right? And so you got to get it outside.
Well, there's 40 million people in California with average disposable incomes higher than what, let's say, New Hampshire and Vermont is, I would say, on average. So they like their maple syrup.
Nice. That's good. Hopefully they keep liking it, right?
Right.
That, so from a person who's going to be producing and selling a lot of bulk syrup, then it probably makes sense if they're going to be selling a lot of syrup to you to be organic, because that market's going to be there for what you want. But.
Well, in general that could be true, but sometimes if they only made 500 gallons of syrup, there's an initial certification cost that'll probably cost $500 to $1,000 to do it. And if you only got 10 barrels of syrup, we're paying 20 cents a pound more for organic. Some years it's 15 cents, so that's less than $2 a gallon premium. So it would depend on the volume that you make. If you got under 1,000 trees and you're selling it all in bulk, you probably won't get your money back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The bigger producers are mostly organically certified right now. The guys that have 10, 20, 30,000 trees, and there's quite a few people like that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. What are some of the biggest factors in determining your bulk syrup price?
Well, there's a lot of things that affect it. One is there's a minimum price it's a marketing order in Canada where the Federation of Quebec Maple Producers sets a floor on the price, so it's never below that floor. You take that price, convert it to US dollars, and add freight onto it. The barrel price in the US is usually at or above that virtually all the time. So that's a factor. But the competition is paying. The syrup is short. If you pay much less, you're not going to get enough supply. There's a lot of different reasons. I mean, the price over time has gone up and down, but the overall trend over 20 years is slowly upward. I mean, it obviously costs more and more to make it, so people need to get paid more and more. But their problem is to try to get the market to actually absorb the price increases. So, they usually have a 60 to 90 day period before you can get a price through, and it's hard to sell New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York syrup for more money if the Canadians don't also go up, because there's more Canadian syrup being sold in the United States grocery stores than there is U.S. syrup, and it's difficult to be much more expensive than what they're charging. That's the problem. I think a lot of the local markets want a U.S. label, or they might want a Vermont label. At the same price, they'll buy the U.S. over Canadian. But will they pay a premium? In most cases, they won't. That's the dilemma right there.
So you'd be happy to pay people more for the syrup, but it
But
dictates what people will pay you for it when you're reselling.
We sell mostly, we have a sales office in Brattleboro, Vermont. We sell mostly we go through brokers, grocery store brokers, and they get sold to the buyers who in turn are selling to the end consumer. So I think the consumer would pay $1 or $2 a quart more oftentimes, but the people in the middle, they don't look at it that way. All they know is they get quotes from 2 Vermont companies, 1 New Hampshire company, 3 Canadians, and they want to know how come you're 3% more money. So there's a lot of price competition. But the further you get away from the wholesale grocers and get into retail at the farm gate, usually the margins are better and people are buying because of the quality of the syrup or relationship with the farmer, and price is no longer the issue.
Yeah.
So.
And your prices will oftentimes fluctuate throughout the year based on demand and supply, is that correct?
The barrel prices are usually set during April by all the different packers, and usually they remain, not always, but usually they remain flat all year.
Oh, okay.
I mean, most people selling in drums, they sell within 2 or 3 months. The store prices, if there's an adjustment, they adjust usually in about June or July, and it takes 60 to 90 days to get it through the system. So you don't see higher prices until September oftentimes. But everybody's costs keep inflating somewhat together, like the cost of glass might go up, or shipping on freight might go up. And so the Vermont and Canadian competitors also incur those same expenses. So in general, the industry is moving all at the same time. Everybody's got different prices, but there's a general upward movement in costs now, and there's a desire to pass it on to the stores who in turn mark it up again. But sometimes they just refuse to buy it. They'll go from 3 brands down to 2, and they tell you to get lost. So there is demand destruction as you get higher and higher. There's places that just will not pay the extra money. I mean, quite a few of the purchasing agents, they don't really care what the producers spend to make it and care about the ethics of the whole thing. All they know is they get prices from 4 suppliers, and a lot of them don't know that much about the product. I mean, they're selling 100 syrups. They sell blueberry, and they sell artificial maple and pure maple and honey and all kinds of stuff. And we're just one amongst a big crowd that they really aren't too concerned about paying the farmers any more money, even if it costs more to make it. So it's not a fair and just world all the time,
Yeah, unfortunately, right? They want to make money. And...
I mean, in a perfect world, we would pay more and we would sell it for more, but it's, we're getting tugged from both directions. It's really difficult to end up with some middle ground to try to work your way through.
Yeah, you guys are kind of stuck in the middle, get hit from both sides, right?
Well, we lose accounts to the competition all the time. Then we pick up some. I mean, right now, during the pandemic, sales are really sky high. About a year ago, they've fallen a little bit since then. They've slowed down. But their long-term trend is good. One of the markets that's improving, the ingredient market, is heating up more, for flavoring, everything from, like I said before, cocktails or cereals or meats or chocolates. We sell to probably 60 or 70 craft breweries, for example. None of them buy a large amount of syrup, but they got the cachet of having the name maple on it. Even if you can't taste it in the beer, they've used a little bit of maple syrup, and so it kind of helps sell the product.
Yeah, and it's getting maple out to other stuff, which is good beyond just table syrup, right?
I mean, you read the labels carefully, and a lot of these Fortune 500 food companies, the ones that have maple sausage or maple whatever, a lot of them have a large amount of brown sugar or artificial maple mixed in it. Mm-hmm. But they do buy enough pure maple to be listed on the label.
To get that name, right?
Yeah. So maybe it's a little bit abusive that way, but they do buy a lot of the off-flavored syrup in the industry. Mm-hmm. Like you said before, you put that in sausage, the flavor of the sausage is so strong it'll mask some pretty poor quality maple syrup. But if you put it in a retail bottle and the consumer brings them home to pour on their waffles, they want it to taste correctly or they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
So,
great. Well, thank you. Is there anything else that either of you guys would want to add that you think general maple producers should know about your side of the business?
well, like the drums, they should put names on their drums. They should put tear weights on their drums. They should be clean.
You'd be amazed how many people call up 6 months later and go, I don't know if I put my name on my drum or not, or even how many I have up there. Could be 6, could be 12.
It's the round one that's silver colored, right?
People do crazy things sometimes. And I mean, sometimes they use non-food grade containers to bring product in. Every year we turn 2 or 3 people away. We won't let them unload their, it might be a lead-sodded milk can that we don't want the lead in the maple syrup, so we refuse it, or they'll have a used plastic barrel that might have had some cleaner in it, some dairy cleaner.
Yep.
And we make them put it back on their truck and bring it home. I mean, it is a food product, and you shouldn't be put it into dairy pipeline cleaner that was used in the milking pile.
Yeah. That's for sure, unfortunately. But I'm sure they're not happy, but that's kind of what they need to learn.
But I think the standards have gotten better. The last 5 years, people have now gotten rid of the old rusty galvanized barrels with the lead in them. They're no longer using as many plastic drums, and they are washing the barrels off. And I think the management of the sugar house is slowly getting cleaner. Most of them have running water now, concrete floors, and they actually sweep the place out once in a while. It was quite bad 25 years ago, but it's trending towards people realizing that it is a food, and you really have to get with the 21st century.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Well, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your time.
You can edit it 2/3 of that back out, and it wouldn't bother me.
So, Aaron, I thought that David and Emma Marvin, along with Bruce and Matthew Bascom, really shared some insightful information about their business operations and the bulk maple syrup market. Were there any key takeaways that you pulled from their interviews?
Yeah, there were a lot of interesting points that they made. And I think one of the key takeaway messages is food safety. The regulatory agencies that we have, a lot of their reaction for food safety is to problems as they arise. But as far as preventing problems, a lot of the onus for that falls on maple producers themselves. We as an industry need to employ food safe practices and be really diligent about it, especially when we're selling bulk, when these syrups are going to get blended with a whole lot of other syrup and sold in large quantities to these big box stores across the country. If there's one contaminated barrel and it gets blended into a bunch of bottles, that could create a big problem for the industry, not only for the person selling it, but for all of us, because it gives the industry a bad image.
Yeah, for sure. And both really emphasize that multiple times, that food safety aspect. That's the number one issue that they really want maple producers that are selling them syrup to focus on. I also thought it kind of interesting to think about that larger picture of the total maple syrup crop, and that, with more supply, we need to have more markets for that bulk maple syrup, right? To be able to have access to those large accounts, we need folks like Butternut Mountain Farms or Bascom's.
Yeah, with a record crop this year in both Canada and the US, there's a lot of syrup out there to sell. I mean, demand is up, but we still need to continuously expand the markets that we sell syrup in so that we don't end up with a supply-induced suppression of prices. And these bulk buyers play a really important role in accessing markets that we couldn't as smaller producers.
Yeah, especially in that ingredient market side of things where consistency is really key.
Yeah, there's so much potential in the ingredient market. And I think we've barely scratched the surface of it in the US, and we've hardly touched it at all internationally. So there's some really big opportunities that would be very difficult for individual businesses to access, selling pallets of maple sugar to a Japanese marketplace or something like that. One of the things that some people might be curious about is how to find a packer to sell to. The people you interviewed are in the Northeast in New England. For someone in Ohio or Western New York, are there recommendations you could make to them so that they could find a packer to sell to?
Yeah, so oftentimes these packers actually have buyers for them that are in different regions throughout the maple belt. And so oftentimes those are equipment dealers. So, I'd highly recommend, reach out to your local equipment dealer or even maybe another maple producer who you think might be selling some bulk syrup, and they would have leads or would be willing to buy that bulk maple syrup, sell it. So that way you don't have to load it up and transport it a long distance. And the price is usually the same as what it would be as if you showed up at the loading dock.
And that's helpful, especially in places like Western New York, where there are a lot of small producers. And some of these buyers of bulk syrup will take 10, 15 gallons at a time. So it's a scalable thing, and it's accessible to a lot of maple producers without having to drive all the way up to New England.
Yeah, exactly.
These are all really great points, Adam. And I'm glad you were able to sit down with these bulk buyers and have this conversation.
Yeah, look forward to more interesting conversations like this in future episodes of Sweet Talk. Thank you for joining us for Sweet Talk, all things maple with Aaron and Adam. Sweet Talk is produced by the Cornell Maple Program and is made possible from funding from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. All music was obtained from Blue Dot Sessions. For more information on all things maple, visit cornellmaple.com. Join us next time for more Maple Sweet Talk. Have a sweet day.